me welcome Marjorie. Come on up.
Marjorie Cohn, expert on international law.
Shortly before Bush invaded Iraq, they pulled the weapons inspectors out, even though the weapons inspectors said we haven't finished our job, we haven't found any weapons of mass destruction. And the head of the weapons inspection team from the United Nations was Hans Blix. Hans Blix just wrote an article in The Guardian where he said that even if Assad did use chemical weapons, the West has no mandate to act as a global policeman. And by ordering the airstrikes against Syria without UN Security Council supports, Obama is doing the same thing that Bush did in 2003. But Hans Blix wrote a sentence which I think is really telling, and we should take to heart, and we should remind our congressional representatives and our government of this. And this is what he wrote. And what is the moral weight of the condemnation by nuclear weapons states of the use of gas as a serious war crime when they themselves will not accept a norm that would criminalize any first use of their own nuclear weapons? Now, I don't know if Obama intended to go to Congress or not, but certainly the worldwide pressure, even Britain is not going along with this, has led to his decision to seek congressional approval. Now, either one of two things could be the case. Either he's counted the votes and he has the votes, or he doesn't have the votes, and Congress will shoot it down, and then Obama will say, yes, I drew that red line, but I can't do anything because Congress is tying my hands. One or the other, to get him off the hook. Now, the United Nations Charter and customary international law, which even if Congress decides to pass a law to override the Charter, they cannot pass a law to override the highest prohibition in international law, which is called jus cogens. There is a jus cogens prohibition against aggressive war. Doesn't matter, even if you set aside the UN Charter. But the UN Charter itself, which was enacted by the countries of the world after World War II to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, mandates that countries settle their disputes peacefully, and makes it illegal for any country to either use force or threaten to use force against another country. And it prohibits intervention in any internal or domestic dispute in another country. There are only two instances where a country can attack another country with military force. One is when the Security Council approves, and that is not happening here. In fact, Obama isn't even going to the Security Council to make his case because he doesn't think he'll get the resolution. And the second is in self-defense. And nobody is claiming that Syria is about to attack the United States or any other country. So it would be illegal, patently illegal, even if Congress approved, even if Congress says yes to Obama, it would still be illegal for the United States to go into Syria and bomb. Also, we don't know, we know that gas was used, it seems quite apparent. We don't know who did it. Whoever did it is committing a war crime and should be referred to the International Criminal Court for prosecution. But for the United States to self-righteously say that we are going to go in, and this is Obama now, we are going to go in with what can only be symbolic, the symbolic killing of people, probably civilians, in order to protect civilians, is the height of hypocrisy. Recently declassified CIA documents reveal U.S. complicity in Saddam Hussein's use of chemical weapons during the Iran-Iraq War. According to Foreign Policy, which is not a left-wing journal, it says the United States applied a cold calculus 3 decades ago to Hussein's widespread use of chemical weapons against his enemies and his own people. Listen to this. The Reagan administration decided that it was better to let the chemical attacks continue if they might turn the tide of the war. And even if they were discovered, the CIA wagered that international outrage and condemnation would be muted. The United States, as was pointed out before, has used depleted uranium, cluster bombs, which blow up and spew tiny bomblets all over, and if they don't blow up, children pick them up and they blow up and they kill them or injure them. White phosphorus gas, it was used in Fallujah, it burns to the bone. It burns to the bone. And the United States used white phosphorus gas, and the Israelis, the United States didn't say a word when the Israelis used white phosphorus gas against the Palestinians. These are war crimes.
God, the hypocrisy is unreal, isn't it?
The United States dropped napalm and tons of Agent Orange on the people of Vietnam to defoliate during the war. And still to this day, babies are being born with deformities, without limbs, without brain cavities, because their ancestors were exposed to Agent Orange. U.S. veterans continue to die of cancer and other serious illnesses because of Agent Orange. That was a chemical weapon. That was a war crime. And yet the United States has not given 1 penny of compensation to the Vietnamese or the Vietnamese Americans, and certainly not enough to U.S. soldier veterans of the Vietnam War for the horrific war crime that we committed in that country. The U.S. military occupied over 75% of the Puerto Rican island of Vieques for 60 years, during which time the Navy routinely practiced with and used Agent Orange, depleted uranium, napalm, and other toxic chemicals. People in Puerto Rico, near Vieques, have terminal health conditions such as cancer, hypertension, respiratory and skin illnesses, and kidney failure. The U.S. Navy has yet to admit, much less seek atonement for the decades of wars and bombing of Vietnam and what the U.S. military did in Vieques. Now, the New York Times reported a few days ago that the U.S. administration is studying the Kosovo precedent because that could guide them in attacking Syria without UN approval. And so the assumption is that what we did in Kosovo was legal. It was not legal. It was not legal. The night before the U.S.-led NATO bombing of Yugoslavia, Bill Clinton, the president at the time, said, "We have to sell to markets around the world. That's what this Kosovo thing is all about." And for centuries, people on both sides of that conflict in the Balkans, in Yugoslavia, had been committing ethnic cleansing against each other. And yet after we went in, the NATO bombing, and removed Slobodan Milosevic, another illegal regime change, regardless of what you think of him, the ethnic cleansing got worse, the refugee problem got worse. That country was also poisoned with depleted uranium, and between 1,500 and 1,800 civilians were killed. The United States never got UN approval for that Kosovo bombing, and it was certainly not done in self-defense because Milosevic was not about to attack any other country, which is required under the UN Charter. So using that Kosovo precedent is not applicable. Humanitarian concerns, even if they really are humanitarian concerns, don't constitute self-defense. The UN Charter does not allow humanitarian interventions. And the problem with humanitarian interventions is who decides? Who decides? when a humanitarian intervention is needed, even if it were legal? What if a small country, not a powerful country, decides that a larger country needs a humanitarian intervention? It's a slippery slope. Obama said this morning on television that what's happening in Syria, the chemical attack, is a risk to our national security. And yet he is supporting Al-Qaeda in Syria. Al-Qaeda is certainly a risk to our national security, and yet Obama is talking
Terrorists
about
supporting terrorists.
Assad probably using these chemical weapons. We still don't know who has used them. What Obama is doing is seeking to take sides in a very complex civil war in which the United States does not belong once again. What the United States and its allies must do is to refrain from military intervention in Syria and take affirmative steps to promote a durable ceasefire and a political solution consistent with international law. And if the U.S. government were truly interested in fomenting peace and promoting accountability, it should apologize to and compensate the victims of its own use of chemical weapons around the world.
Thank you very much, Marjorie. Thanks for coming out. We really appreciate your comments. Now, I just heard that, and before I say this, these other wars, guess what? And the person that